Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with another 1/6 scale model review video for the 1/6 scale Dragon M1A1 75mm Pack Howitzer. The model in this video is left 100% stock, and I have done literally nothing to it to bring it up to the condition that we have here. These models here were sold as a pre-built and pre-painted model, and were actually available for a limited period of time. We'll be going over all of that as the video continues. This particular model here is not for sale and or purchase. This is something that's fresh out of my reference collection, and I'm basically just filming it just to go ahead and archive it and have it on YouTube for all to enjoy. Before we go any further with the video, though, let's go ahead and take a quick walk around this really excellent piece. As I mentioned before, the model itself is of course 1/6 scale, and this was produced by the company Dragon. Dragon only produced these for a very short period of time in a very limited number. The reason for the exclusivity was that this here was actually a show exclusive, specifically the 2007 DX Expo. If we rewind our clocks back to this period, Dragon was really heavily involved in the 1/6 scale industry. They were constantly producing 1/6 scale action figures accessories, and they were even dabbling with 1/6 scale vehicles, starting off with smaller items like anti-tank guns and things along those lines, to eventually bringing us full tanks like the Panzer II and eventually their M4A3 Sherman. Also at this time, Dragon were sponsoring full events. In this case here, the DX Expo. The DX Expo was a yearly show where Dragon would announce new products, and also to commemorate the show, they would have limited production specialty items that they would offer for sale. This was done in 1/6 scale, in this case here with the Pack Howitzer, but they also did the same thing with their smaller scale kits, and there are several 1/35 scale kits out there that are similar to this one here, being a specialty show limited production exclusive. Of course, if anyone's a fan of action figure collecting or just collecting toys in general, this is something that is not unheard of. a lot of companies do the exact same business model. Whenever like Comic-Con or Toy Fair come around, they usually have a specialty item that's a limited produce variant, and it's something again to commemorate the show. Well, Dragon would do this all throughout the 2000s, and we've seen some bangers that were released by them. Some exclusives would be different paint variations on vehicles to full-blown anti-tank guns, even flat guns even. Eventually, even, yes, the Sherman tank itself was originally a 2010 or 2011 show exclusive. So this was something when, again, Dragon will pull out the big guns and do something pretty noteworthy. Well, for 2007, that was this example that we have here, the M1A1 Pack Howitzer. And when this thing was announced, it was an immediate slam dunk. The M1A1 Pack Howitzer was a fantastic choice for them to choose to create a model of. The unit is a very historical, significant one. These things were used very, very commonly during World War II and even afterwards. The model itself is a very unique subject matter. It's got a lot of cool things going for it. And on top of that, the size is something that is very manageable. Remember, 1/6 scale, size definitely becomes a limiting factor for some people out there, and also this extends into cost. But this model over here basically balances everything out very evenly. So it was a complete no-brainer. In fact, at the time, there were several people who were trying to scratch build these things, and even one individual was creating masters for Panzerwerk to go ahead and produce in resin, but obviously when this kit here was announced, all those basically fell by the wayside. Also, the model's execution by Dragon was superb. The model was made from excellent materials, where it's a combination of both injection molded polystyrene as well as also polystone resin. Now, yes, I'm pretty sure you're going to hear some people scoffing at that one. As I mentioned in the Radio Kugelwagen review video, Dragon at this time was producing a lot of interesting limited release items in a material called polystone, which is a type of resin, and that was one that was met with, shall we say, some controversy. You either liked it or you absolutely hated it. However, on this model over here, it utilizes both of those materials, but the balance is pretty good. So the important components that are load-bearing are made out of polystyrene, which is obviously stronger, but a lot of the finer detailed components are made out of the resin material, again, taking advantage of the detail fidelity you could get out of that medium. Not only was the detailing excellent, but the model also has some really good and interesting functionality, which we'll be going over in this video. Finally, the model's paintwork was also quite nicely done, and the price point was very, very reasonable. These models here, I believe, back in the day came in at under $200, which, if I can remember, what we paid for this one was, what, about $150, maybe $175? Around thereabouts. So again, something like this was ticking all of the boxes, and these things were a huge, huge slam dunk. Unfortunately, the biggest tragedy that these units had was that they were just not produced in large numbers. These things only had a single production run, and after that, they just came and went. Unlike the other models that have been produced by Dragon as DX show exclusives, where they were first released in a pre-built and pre-painted model format like this one over here, but as the years went on into the early 2010s, they revisited those models and re-released them as a plastic unassembled kit form. This one here, that just wasn't the case. What you see is what you have, so what's on the market is on the market, which is really sad to say, because if there's one model that I really wish that they would go ahead and re-release in a kit format, it'd definitely be the Pack Howitzer. And after I go through the features in this video, you'll see exactly why. So as I mentioned before, the model has some really excellent functionality, one of which is actually a hallmark of the Pack Howitzer itself, and that is its ability to be taken down into small sub-assemblies, and this one can actually do that. If I go ahead and hit these two latches here on either side of the cradle, kind of hard to do with one hand with no tripod, I could go ahead now and just slide the entire unit off of the mount, just like so. And there we have the complete unit right there. The wheels and carriage can also be removed. Now, it's been a long time since I've actually done this. When you bought the model, it came in its sub-assembly format, just like the real one, so you actually have to kind of build it. much along the same ways as you would the real one. Why, by the way, this feature is pretty cool. One, it's very historically accurate and true to form to the real one. But two, if you're going to be having one of these in a diorama format, you could literally have this thing broken down and being hauled up with donkeys like the real one was actually intended for, which again, it's a nice little feature. So briefly off camera, I just took off the carriage. It literally just wiggles out. As you see, there's some flat sections over here, and they interact with the areas here on the carriage, there and there. And these things are not held down with glue or any other type of latches or nothing. They literally just friction fit into these locations here, and the fit is pretty good. The next is the carriage itself, and the unit is hinged right here, and you can just fold it up just like so. The other thing to mention is that this model does have elevation to it, and right now the thing is elevated in the upward state. If I go ahead and lower it, one hand, which is kind of risky. Hang on, I really don't want to break this. One moment, please. There we go. Ah, perfect. So, with that taken care of, you can see how the unit can just fold up in a nice little package. If I remember, I think the piece was two separate parts, and you had these hinge pins here that you plug in place, and then the thing obtains its hinge capability. But a little hazy on this. Obviously, it's been quite a while since I purchased this thing. But as you can see, it's now folded up pretty conveniently. With the piece taken down into its sub-assemblies, it makes it quite easy to continue this review. So starting with the top cover, here you can see the unit here both outside and in. And the unit itself is all cast polystone. This is a resin component. Has a nice little chunky feel to it. It definitely feels high quality. It's not too thin or brittle or anything along those lines. I like the handles that we have right here on the front and on the back. And it's just indicative of a high quality piece. From the top cover takes us to the main barrel assembly. The unit itself is made from resin as it appears, although it has a feel of plastic, but upon closer inspection, I think this thing is actually resin. On the barrel section, you can see how it tapers down right over here. The outer appearance has the correct thickness, but it has that conical type layout to it, and this is something that's commonly done on many models out there in various scales in order to get the appropriate thickness on the end, but it leaves for a nice robust piece that is also easier to cast. Also, for something that's made out of resin, it's actually quite light, which again has the properties of injection molded polystyrene, but to me, it just, again, just judging by some of the appearance on some of the pieces, it is actually resin. On the front section, we have that nice little lift ring right over there. And we have a matching ring right there on the breech block. The breech itself is a very nice piece. Has some good detailing on it. I believe it is missing the firing pin detailing, which would be right there in the center. I'm a little hazy on the Pack Howitzer. Actually, oddly enough, did a walk around on a real one a few years ago at this point, and it would be fun to compare and contrast to see exactly where this one is slightly lacking. The lever is also a very nice feature, and as for how this works, I'll actually show that once the thing has been reassembled. It's a bit tricky to do in its disassembled state. From the barrel assembly, it takes us to the first portion of the cradle here. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this is also a polystone component, as it appears to be a solid cast resin pouring. But again, it's very nicely detailed, and it's also, again, really high quality. I like how we have the details integrally molded in. I believe these here are supposed to be fasteners on the real one, and these ones here, they're just circular sections, so take that for what you will. Also, one thing that's nice is that everything lines up appropriately. Some of the complaints that the polystone parts had back in the day was that they were subject to warpage, and this one here, that's just not the case. So much so that, again, for a long period of time, I could swear these things were actually made out of polystyrene and not cast resin. And on that note, this takes us to the bottom portion here of the carriage. And this is resin. It definitely has the heft of a resin component. Here we have, I believe, it's not really a travel lock. Not really sure what this thing is. It's not a gauge of some sort, but either way, it's kind of dangles here. It's nice that they made it functional. That's pretty cool. I like, again, the quality found on the parts. The reinforcement ribs look excellent. So do the mount extensions over here. The optic mount looks pretty good too. Again, it's just a very nice quality piece. The rails are nicely rendered out, and the whole unit does slide into this portion over here. One nice feature that this unit does have is that the unit can be rendered to be recoiling, which is a nice feature. What is absent though are the actual springs and other recoil dampeners, which of course would be on the real one. Those are absent on this kit admittedly, but at least you can render it either in the intact or the recoiled state, which again for diorama use is something that becomes quite relevant. Next we have the optic right over here. The optic is actually the USGI one. I forgot the name offhand, but oddly enough, I actually rendered this as a 3D printed component found on the ECA catalog with a real rubber eye cup, no less. But this was what was supplied with this set. It's a single casting, and it's actually pretty good. Again, it's a very nice quality piece. This on the real one's actually a bubble level. I remember that vividly when I was designing the other one. And again, just everything is decently rendered out. This now brings us to the carriage. So we have the little hand crank over here with this little threaded section. I believe this might be a spring on the real one. From what I can recall, you twist this in order to get the whole unit to pivot left and right. Or I believe that's what it's for. Don't be too harsh in the comment section. Actually, if you do know what this is for, feel free to put it down there. We all would like to know that for certain. Anyway, the piece is all cast resin. This is all polystone. As are the wheels, and this probably has the most heft of the entire model. This brings us now to the wheels themselves. The wheels, which include the rim and the tire, are a single casting, and they are absolutely excellent. I love the detailing here on the rim. It has the little rivets found on the perimeter. It has the right stamping feature, and also has the lug nut details integrally molded on. It looks like that the end cap over there is separate from the rim itself, which again is a nice feature right there. It has a nice detailing look to it. Really the only thing that's missing I think is the valve stem, but other than that the piece is actually pretty solid. On the rubber tire itself we can see the thread pattern here on the face, and the thread pattern is absolutely excellent. Nice and deeply molded in, very clear definition, excellent quality piece. What's also interesting to point out is that if anyone has ever seen the tech manuals of not just this unit, but several other artillery pieces, they always seem to have this exact thread pattern on the photographs found in the tech manuals, and not the US military off-road type tires. It's an interesting data point that I just want to point out. So the fact they went with these tires instead of the standard US military type pattern is also pretty interesting. What is absent on the tire, though, are any sort of markings that would be on the outer portion, which would be the manufacturer, the size, things along those lines. Those, of course, would be found on tires, but on the model here, they are absent. Either way, though, outside of that, the tires are absolutely awesome. And probably one of my favorite aspects on the entire piece. All right, now this brings us to the main carriage itself. This is a mix of plastic and resin. I believe this section over here where the paint is chipped off is the resin. It's that yellowy color that we have right there. And now that it's in focus, hopefully that comes out in better light. But the unit is really, really nice. You'll notice that the skeletal structure is a two-piece assembly, which is excellent. The frame is, again, one of the model's strong suits right here. They could easily have just cheaped out and made this as a solid piece, but they didn't do that. On this portion over here, you can see the springs, which are the counterbalance springs for the elevation. They do not work. They are just static, but they do give you the nice detailing that would be present in these locations over here. The riveting is also, again, absolutely excellent. This thing is as riveted as much as a bridge trestle. And the riveting is all here, clear as day. It is a beautiful piece. You can see the elevation mechanism right there. We'll be circling back to that momentarily. The hooks, as we saw before, are fully functional and actually hold the upper carriage in place. I love the little tie downs right there and there. The fact that they made them real tie downs and not just molded sections is, again, a very nice touch. We do have a little center seam in this section over here, but this would actually be seen on the real ones, so that's perfectly fine. We have this nice little faux leather strap right here with a buckle. Nice touch indeed. And we have the end of the trail where we have the tow hitch mount, as well as the shovel section. Another data point I want to mention is with the data plate. This little oval plate over here, it's fastened to the side of the carriage. This is actually a data plate. Usually they're made out of brass, and it has a bunch of information on it, like who manufactured it, the serial number, stuff like that. And generally these are actually made out of brass and are left in their brass coloring. However, I could definitely see it being very plausible that in field or when the things are serviced and repainted, that they just paint over the data plate. That's definitely something that's more likely to happen. So in this format over here, it's not necessarily an issue. My biggest criticism with the component, however, involves the hinge mechanism. Although the piece is nicely hinged, as you can see, one drawback that it has involves the lockup, or I should say lack thereof. If you look at the model over here, you can see there's a hole molded into this section over here, and when I flip the piece over, you will see the knuckle on the opposite side. Well, you'll see that there's no hole that's present on this section over here. On the real one, there is, I believe, a lock pin that goes into this section, which is used to pin the thing in place and make it nice and solid. Why this is relevant is because when you put the armament onto the top portion over here, with the added weight on this side, when you put it down, almost always it wants to just pop off like that and sit in this type of format. It's one of those weird quirks that this model does have, and I just don't understand why Dragon didn't just drill this out and give you the pins to go with it, but here we are. Fortunately, the piece does lock up pretty snug, or snug enough, I should say, with the friction fit that it has. But if you are handling one of these, just make sure when you set it down to prop it up, because without fail, almost always you put it down and it's going to go boop like that almost every single time. In fact, when I was filming this video, at first when I was setting everything up, I had to go ahead and pop this thing back in place a number of times. If you do have one of these and you want to approve it, fortunately, it's not hard to do. You just literally take a pencil, you draw the little indentation right over there, drill the section out, and now you can have a nice pin that goes in place and locks this thing as long as you need it. With the camera back on the tripod, I can go ahead and get this thing assembled for you on camera so you get to see exactly how it goes. So here we have the axles. This goes on first. Now, as I mentioned before, the piece didn't have a lockup. Well, actually incorrect. It actually does, and it's built in. So no need to glue it. So undo what I said before. All right, so first thing I want to make sure that the hooks are out of the way. I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to slide it in. I briefly just checked on the phone the correct orientation, and it goes in like this. So you see these flat sections? They slide in here, just like so. And then to lock it, you just rotate this thing up, and that's it. You see how it locked up over there? Now this thing can't come out. So that's very important for you to watch out for. If you have one of these, don't glue it. Just make sure you pivot it upward. Also, if you have one of these, make sure it isn't pivoted in the upward state. Otherwise, the wheels may potentially fall out on you. And if these fall out and hit the floor, rip, you're done. Good luck trying to glue that back together. So, all right, so that's all taken care of. Now it's time to reassemble the carriage. So I have this portion right here. I'm going to take this guy here. I'm going to slide him in, just like so. There we go. Take the barrel assembly and slide him in as well, just like so. Want to line it up just like that. See these two little slots found on the side portion of the breech block? They go into those little matching corresponding holes right there and there. Just like so. Then, top cover locks up right over here in the front. Ooh, hang on. This is a little tricky to get on camera, but make sure that the two sections cradle into each other like that. They sit forward, and then you just push the whole unit forward gently, and there we go. Be careful. This is resin. You don't want to manhandle it. Just a nice little gentle shove is all you need to get the piece of seat in place. At this point here, I'll put it into the carriage. Oh, before I do that, take the optic, plug it into the optic mount right here. This piece wants to pivot around on you. Generally, these are straight as can be. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead now and mount this inside of the mount. So we have these two hooks here and here, and the two main lugs here, and there's one on the opposite side. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure the string doesn't get in the way, as it definitely loves to do that. Remember what I told you about that? All right, so I'm going to find the sweet spot, line it in, and drop it down. At that point here, these hooks pivot upward and click into place. Okay, just like so. Same with this guy over here. This little hook, there's this little pivoting piece over here you want to watch out for. But there we go, perfect. And that's it. The unit is now fully assembled. Remember what I said about the mount? Well, watch this. If I just touch it just a little bit, it buckles. So again, that's something to watch out for every single time you handle it. Either way, there's the assembly. So the next thing I want to mention is with the elevation of the unit. The unit can elevate, but you want to be very careful with it because, again, of the materials and also with the thicknesses and the weight that things are, you can potentially break it. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab the piece and elevate it. To do that, I'm going to put my finger on each of these hooks here on the front, and I'm going to go ahead and lift upward. And there we go. It's an artillery piece. It would be really dumb to not have the piece be able to elevate, now would it? And with the camera zoomed out, you can get a better idea of what it looks like in the elevated state. Like I mentioned before, the piece is nice and robust in that the component is nice and stiff where it won't just droop on you, which is definitely not something that you want. Again, overall, the piece is very nicely engineered. So with that out of the way, let me take you to one more feature that this unit does have. And that is with the breech. First, the lanyard. Yes, this thing does have a lanyard that comes with it, and it's a really cool piece. On the real one, this is how you fire it. You just take this thing and yank on it, and kaboom, it goes off. Like I stated before, the recoil does work, so you can render it in the recoiled state like that right there. And if the camera zoomed out, you get to see exactly what it looks like in the fired state. If you want to do, again, like a nice snapshot type diorama, there you go. Otherwise, you just generally leave it in that type of format. But it's a nice feature that the unit does have, admittedly. The very next thing I want to mention involves the breech block. So the lever here is functional, as is the breech. It does slide. And what's really cool about this piece is that the thing actually works. Or it's supposed to. If I grab the latch here and pull it, you can see that the breech opens up and slides out of the way. Hopefully in this camera angle, you get to see it in better light. It does work, but it's not bomb-proof. The pieces are just pinned together with molded-in pins, and it's not uncommon for the piece to just pop off, but luckily it doesn't break. If it just pops off, you just plug the piece back in and you're good to go. Obviously, you don't want to use glue on this because then it's no longer going to function. But either way, this is a very nice little piece of detail and function that the model does have. Again, kudos to Dragon for coming up with this one. The next thing I want to mention is the paint and the weathering. And again, this is one of the model's high points. The shade of olive drab and the darker shade of olive drab that's used to countershade everything are superb. And that's really all there is to the howitzer itself. And if you're watching this and you're saying to yourself, well, John, that's nice and good, but what about any accessories, i.e. shells, propellant charges, swabs, things along those lines? Well, that did not come with this unit. This was just a standalone artillery piece. But Dragon went ahead and tooled up those components and sold them as a Cyber Hobby exclusive that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, were sold as a accessory set or were even paired with a figure. Not really sure, I'm a little hazy, but either way, there were some components that went along with this to complete and flesh out the setup. In the end, there's nothing much more I can say about this piece. I absolutely love this set here. In my opinion, this was actually one of Dragon's best releases. They basically had everything going right for them. The subject matter was excellent, the execution was even better, and the final look and outcome of the model is absolutely sublime. I really wish, the only ding and kink in the armor is that I really wish that this wasn't just a limited one-time release. If this would have been released as a plastic model kit, this thing would have been absolutely awesome. But sadly, that's not the reality we live in. Hopefully, if Dragon's watching this, guys, please re-release this. That would be awesome. Even as a kit, I would definitely buy a ton of them. But until that day comes, the one here in my reference collection is definitely going to be a cherished and most prized possession. And hopefully, after watching this video, you walked away with a newfound appreciation for this unit over here. Perhaps if you're one of the few lucky ones that actually have one of these in your collection, or more than one in your collection, if you have more than one, hats off to you, you're a really cool guy and you know what you have. But perhaps maybe if you have one, it's kind of tucked away in the back of your collection, maybe it might be time to dust it off and take a moment to appreciate it, as the unit is actually quite special. Or if you do not have one of these and you encounter one either at a swap meet or a show or any type of chance encounter, maybe you might have the insight now to perhaps look into it and maybe acquire and add it to your collection, give it a good home. Trust me, it's a really cool piece. You will not be disappointed with having one of these added to your collection. And with that, that wraps up this model review video for the 1/6 scale Dragon M1A1 Pack Howitzer set. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel, where it's a great way to keep up to date on new posted content, being 1/6 scale model review videos like this one over here, or my other type of content being 1/6 scale project update videos and smaller scale model showcase videos when they get posted. Another way to keep in loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook, where I have more photographs of the other larger and smaller scale builds that have been seen on this channel in the past. And of course, furthermore, don't forget to swing by eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks again. I'll be seeing you all again on the next one. Till then.